I have a story. Going into the month of February, it is the Schenectady Colonial Festival. And one of my interests in storytelling is historical stories, as you know. And I have a story that's as much about Schenectady as anything I can remember. And it has a little bit to do with why we have a statue of an Indian in the stockade. And I'd like to tell it now.
Great.
Johann Lindsay Glenn, the son of Alexander Lindsay Glenn, who had founded Scotia and helped found our city of Schenectady, told his servants, "Don't bank the fires, keep them burning, because the cold is so bitter, we'll need all the heat we can get tonight." And he retired to bed worried. It was February the 7th, 1690. And he was worried because his daughter was across the river in the village where he had another house at a party for Domine Tessmacher, who was celebrating his engagement. And he was worried because the times were unsettled. There was a rumor of war with the French in Canada, and there was also the rumor of unsettlement among some of the Dutch in their fear for the new regime that had taken over in England under William of Orange. He was even more disconcerted because at 2 o'clock in the morning he was awoken by a shot and a scream, and he saw the color of flames arcing across the sky, across the river, and he was terrified. He was terrified. But he ordered his household to arms and barricaded the door to see what would come next. In the morning, in the early light, he looked out, and there was a French officer, and there was Crin, a former Mohawk from the Mohawk Valley, right at the river bank with a flag of truce, and he knew what had happened. They came up to his door. He stepped outside with his firelock, and they said, "Bear no arms, have no fear. We wish you no ill. We are under specific instructions to not harm you or any of your family." What? Well, you have been a friend to people who were captive by the Mohawks, excluding particularly Count Richelieu. Who was he? Well, he's the assistant to the governor of Canada, and he instructed us specifically not to harm your family. Apparently, your father saved him from a certain death by the Mohawks. You secreted him away in a salt cake to Albany. Oh, I remember, I was just a boy. And even though he was fearful and angry, Glenn said, "Well, come in, you must be cold. You've had a hard day at night." And he fed them porridge, and then they said, "What can we do for you?" He says, "Well, I'm dismayed because you've already probably killed some of my family, but let me go see who my family is still alive." And he went back across. And there in the church where his mom and dad were buried in the floor, they sat him down and they led the prisoners in. And he began to say every third person was his cousin. And finally, at the end of about 14, they said, "Glenn, you have too big a family." But he had been successful in getting most of the women, all of the women, sequestered to his care and not taken prisoner to Canada. He took them back across the river and fed them breakfast as well. One of his first things in that early morning hour was to send a message up the river to Ganoga. Ganoga was the closest Mohawk village or castle. And by late afternoon into Schenectady, what was left of the Schenectady was in ruins, came strong right arm of the Mohawks, Ostagraga. His name in Christian terms was Lawrence, and he was a friend of our village. He was a charter member of the Reformed Church, and he was devastated by what he saw. There were 20 Mohawk Indians who had been spared. They'd been at the party, and the French and Indians did not hurt them because they wanted to secure the good favor of the Mohawks for trade. And he said to them, "Go get more braves," and dispatched 2 or 3 of his other braves on the trail of the retreating French and prisoners. And he went overland to Albany to appeal to the English forces for reinforcements. and to go after the retreating French. He was quite surprised when he got to Albany because he really was faced with a dilemma because the English really didn't want to go after any Dutch people. If they're in the woods with the French and there's a risk to me, I'm not going there. He was quite perplexed, but he went to the Connecticut militia. Now, there had been some Connecticut militia stationed there to protect the frontier, and they had 4 people taken prisoner who were still alive. So they were ashamed to go with Lawrence. And they lasted about 2 days. One, they had a hard time keeping up with the pace, and they were really worried about getting ambushed, and they were also kind of worried about getting shot up or killed by the Mohawks. Well, Lawrence kept on that trail, and he went up through Glens Falls, named after Johannes Glen later on, and he went over the Haida Land and up Lake George, and just south of Crown Point, the retreating French and Indians looked over their shoulder, and they saw a thin line of Mohawk warriors, and they knew who it was. It could be nobody else but that strong right arm, that enforcer, that Mohawk chief, Lawrence. And they hurried ahead and they bivvied up and they got ready for a fight right at Crown Point. And it's a very good place to defend. And Lawrence brought his Indians right up to the lip of the musket range and looked over the situation, and he said to his warriors, he said, "Make ready for war. I want you to paint for war and paint for battle because we will have our way with these people today." They said, "But our paint is frozen." "Rub your hands together, get it ready, paint for war." And then Lawrence went to the lakeside with a sign for parley. And down came Crinn, down came Crinn, down came the French captain, and he said to them, "You have done a great military deed. You have gone all the way through the wilderness. You have accomplished your means, and in so doing, you have hurt my people and my friends. You know who I am. I am Lawrence the Mohawk, the enforcer. You have injured my people. You have killed my friends. We will have our way with you today. You have us outnumbered, but we are Mohawk warriors, and we will hound you all the way to Montreal. And we will have our way, and we will have our due." On the other hand, we're all Christians. We're all Christians. We know there's a better way to do this than what we do. So I'll tell you what. You show me some sign that you're serious about not raiding us again. Send me a couple of people. Send over the Wemple boy, the Roman boy, Fat Sergeant from Connecticut, and anybody else that you want. Send me 4. And a list of those that you hold in prisoner and what you want in ransom. And I will take that word back to Albany, and I will promise to be in Montreal by September with the ransom for those other prisoners. Or, on the other hand, we will have our way with you all the way to Montreal. And some of us will go home as heroes, and some of us will go home only as memories in our wigwam. Iroquois, which literally meant "I have spoken." And the whites, when they heard it, adopted that as the name for the whole Confederation. And he turned and he walked away. When he got back to his braves, they were probably saying, "Lawrence, how'd it go? I'm painted for war, but you think he's going to do it? Or we're going to have to whack these guys, or what? What's going to happen?" In less than 3 minutes, over came the Wemple boy, the Roman boy, whose father had fought so bravely, the Fat Sergeant from the Connecticut, and another one of the Connecticut militia who was very sick. Lawrence gathered those people. Without even looking or waving at the French and Indians, he led them down the lake. They got as far as Ticonderoga, and they built a big fire, and they set out a few guards, and they ate what little food they had, and they hunted, and they strengthened the captives. And then they went back over that road, that path over Lake George and down around the falls that now bear Glen's name. And when they got to the Sacandaga River, they didn't go back toward Albany. They went up over the Sacandaga and back down across the hunting grounds to their castle at Ganoga. They did not bring the prisoners back to the British until Easter. And it's recorded in the book of transactions in the Dutch church in Albany that Two of the Connecticut militia and the Vroman boy and the Wemple boy are reinstated into the Dutch church, and that Lawrence had returned them there. And in gratitude, years later, we put a statue up of an Indian in the middle of our neighborhood downtown. And it says, Lawrence, chief of the Mohawk Nation, leader of the attempt to rescue the prisoners in the massacre 1690. And I say to you, he was a friend at a time when being a friend required more courage than many people thought was possible. Iroquois, I have spoken.